On Press Perspective today, we touch upon the role of artificial intelligence in KCulture, ranging from theater to shamanism. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It's Friday, April 24th, and time for our talk on social stories that have been making media headlines. Today, there is a common factor. It's artificial intelligence. That being said, I have independent journalist Kelly Kasulis Cho here in the studio. Kelly, it's lovely to have you here.
Happy to be back, thanks.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Kelly, we start with you. So let's begin with details of the AI shamans forecasting the future here in capital Seoul.
Yeah, this was a fun story for me to read in the national media as well. So for those who don't know, there's a decent segment of the Korean population that still sees fortune tellers or shamans. I have a cousin that's around my age that does that. She pays a lot of money and she waits like a year or a year and a half to see a specific person that she trusts, right, to get her fortune told, to be given advice. And so there's been some news media coverage about this company called Pinaida, I guess, that I haven't been, but they have a physical location where you can visit an AI shaman instead. And I guess the plus there would be you don't have to wait a year and a half to get on the list. It's probably a lot more cost effective as well. But it essentially looks like, you know, people standing in front of these screens mounted on the wall, and there's kind of this creepy looking like avatar, this disembodied face, if you will, that speaks to you and gives you your fortune. And, you know, I don't really find it that surprising. I know that a lot of people are excited about the fact that this is another application of AI. But I mean, without the AI technology, we've kind of always turned to whatever the latest tech is to get our fortune told, to give us some psychological relief. Like when I was young, it was the magic 8-ball, right? Or I think the first thing I thought of was those machines, the Zoltar machine. It was like this guy with the headdress, and you would put in a coin and he would give you your fortune. So this is kind of the updated version of that. And I will say one phenomenon that I have noticed among my Korean friends in their 30s and 40s is they kind of go to ChatGPT or Gemini or Cloud for personal life advice, maybe not fortune telling, but they consult them on an emotional level to kind of validate some of the things that they're going through or their thought process about major life moves. And so that's maybe another similar application of AI being used for, I think what these things are really about is getting some reassurance that everything's going to be okay, right? And so that's a private way to do it, maybe in the same way that an AI shaman is.
Right. Colin, I wonder, have you had your fortune told by a musokin here in South Korea? And also, what do you believe are the implications of this cultural practice for Koreans, generally speaking?
Yes, you know, I have not had it done, unfortunately, but don't think I haven't been tempted. Because I walk by, I mean, on the streets of Seoul, you walk by these places on a daily basis, probably. If you're a tourist in Seoul, a foreign tourist, you probably don't notice, but there are all these tents, sidewalk tents and little shops, and in any place there is a retail space that a fortune teller can move into, they usually do. And often they have a decent business. Some of them don't get frequented, but many do. So Koreans are going to these fortune tellers. And as we've seen from news stories in recent years, this goes to the highest levels of politics and business, somewhat controversially, but it happens. And my mind goes back to this book by then an economist correspondent named Daniel Tudor called Korea, the Impossible Country, one of the acclaimed books sort of explaining Korea, which was then translated into Korean and published here. And one thing I heard from Korean readers of the book that they really liked was that he writes about musok, this Korean shamanism, that he has a whole chapter about it, because to their mind, you know, anybody who writes about modern Korea even Korea today, and does not address musok is missing something important in the picture. Because as they would say, and as Daniel Tudor also argues to an extent, it still exists in many different forms. You know, it's no longer the olden days where they were an extremely visible presence in society and a highly respected presence. I mean, now for a period they were very sort of disreputable, and only recently, I would say, have really come back into popular culture in a sort of fun way, you could say. We mentioned the AI shaman. There's been a boom in sort of young shaman also taking to social media and making themselves known there. And it's become something more respected, or at least more palatable to mention in mixed company than it used to be. But at the same time, you see traces of shamanism in so many aspects of Korean life, even other religions, Christianity and Buddhism being the two big ones in Korea, both of which, as you can see in Daniel Tudor's book or elsewhere, are described as having traces of shamanism, shamanistic characteristics, you could say. And so, this is evidence of, I love this AI shaman story because it combines two signal qualities of modern Korea. Number one, the sort of headlong plunge people make into new technology. And number two, the way that remnants of the past stick very persistently. So it could seem like Koreans just cast off everything in the past in order to find their way to the future, but a lot of it sticks around, just the form changes. If you look closely, you can recognize what it is.
Right, and along with these AI shamans, Kelly, saju cafes, you need to tell us what they are for the sake of our viewers who are not familiar with saju cafes. They've been around for quite a while, and in recent times, of course, they're becoming a travel experience for foreign visitors to the country. Could you tell us a bit about them?
Well, these are basically places where you can walk in and get your fortune told, right? We have these where I'm from in Boston. I've seen them in Europe. They're all around the world. But of course, there's a certain Korea-specific streak to saju cafes. And why this is kind of a growing phenomenon among foreign tourists, I've thought about this a bit. I think there's many prongs to this. I think Korea's reputation abroad has become more colorful, more nuanced, less one track. People come to Korea because they're interested in Korean culture more than ever before. I think when I first moved here about 10 years ago, the kind of average tourist itinerary might be some dark tourism, going to the DMZ. Much of the fascination around this country was kind of this US-centric, look at this country, as a place to get maybe a suit tailored for cheap, but there wasn't that deeper level of appreciation or desire to experience what, being Korean might be. And now we're seeing, there's various aspects of K-beauty, Korean cinema, Korean pop music that people are uniquely interested in. And this is probably another element of experiencing a culture. I think, speaking to Western tourists, there's always been kind of an Orientalist perspective on fortune telling, where for whatever reason, someone from Boston might trust a Korean shaman and what they say about their future than a fellow fortune teller from the neighboring Southie neighborhood, you know what I mean? In the same way that I know a fortune teller in the United States, and her, she always has to let you know that she studied in India for 15 years, she's the real deal. So I think there's that aspect to this as well. Social media spreads these ideas, and I think Korea is starting to realize that tourism is a very real industry that people can capitalize on here. I've definitely seen more offerings of, fortune-telling services in English. I still don't think it's that accessible for foreign tourists. It could certainly be better. But yeah, I think it's a desire to experience, Korean culture, maybe to believe in something that was seen as out of fashion in the 90s. I think we're kind of having this arc as well, where these kind of hyper-scientific, secular, techno-forward views of the world are kind of giving way to crystals and yoga and things like that. So, or pursuing spirituality in a way that is not necessarily Christian. So I think there's many reasons why we're seeing more and more of this.
Right. Colin, screen productions centered on shamans are also becoming quite popular, ranging from, of course, dramas as well as actual shows about them. How do you explain this popularity?
Yeah, film as well. There have been several genres in which Korean film has made inroads in the West, and one of them is horror. And there have been a few notable successes over the past sort of 20 years. But since shamanism has become a major theme in Korean horror movies, I think they've done even better in Korea, but also abroad as well. The theme does seem to translate to some extent, but I think of examples like Goksong, or The Wailing, which was a very successful horror movie here. Later on, Pamyo, I think it was Exuma in English, something like that. Those two have shamanistic themes and characters, and these films also, as do new TV series, newer television series to which you alluded, they make their shaman sort of fashionable and younger than the kind of popular culture image that existed of shaman who were sort of sketchy middle-aged women or older than that, and they weren't necessarily the kind of figures you would put forward in popular culture. But now there's been an attempt to make cool shaman in popular culture, and it's been working. But I think even abroad, this sort of the shamanism, traditional Korean shamanism, as it translates into film, it seems to have brought something new to a genre that was kind of feeling exhausted. There are only so many horror themes you can pursue when you're going with sort of global material. But as Bong Joon-ho, one of the most acclaimed Korean filmmakers, said, who has not worked in horror specifically, although he's got close to it. He is a fan of genre, I suspect. The most Korean subjects are the most universal. And I think with this very Korean subject of, I've heard it called K-musok. If any word didn't need the K, you'd think it'd be musok. But shamanism, Korean shamanism has been a surprising vector for popular culture, even abroad.
Right, indeed. And staying with AI and culture, but moving forward, the New York Times, Kelly, it says theaters in South Korea are hoping for their K-pop moment via AI glasses. Could you give us some context?
Yeah, I will say the term AI glasses sounds more like an appealing buzzword than maybe the reality. We're talking about glasses that essentially translate what's going on and show that if you're wearing them, right? So I don't even know necessarily if they're always AI translated, because we're talking about theaters where things are scripted. So it could be that there's a professional translation done by a real, human being, and this experience is being played back. But either way, I think it's a good story about how Korea is really starting to realize that it has mass appeal globally in terms of the arts, and really trying to make this place more friendly to tourists. A couple of years ago, as a journalist, I was invited to an off-Broadway production here, and they projected subtitles in English onto the walls of the theater in case there were any foreign guests. And I remember thinking, it's really a shame that this isn't being done more. We have the technology for that. And also, to be honest, it was pretty hard to see the subtitles with the projections, because one, the lighting wasn't dark enough, and two, it was quite small. So this is basically an updated version of that. You literally have it in your lenses. I think it could really open up Korean arts to foreign audiences. Maybe there's an opportunity to show those translations in multiple languages. And, their glasses, their AI, it is exciting. I will say I've been to other countries where this kind of technology more or less has already been used. I've been to, Soviet puppet shows that have some form of, live English translation going on, or at least scripted English translation for foreign tourists. Same with, having it in, kind of Russian adjacent languages. So overall, I think it's a good thing. And I will say, I don't think Koreans appreciate how advanced their movie theaters, for instance, are. Usually when I have friends visiting from the United States, I always say, let's take you to a 4D movie. Because in the US still, a 4D movie is like 20 minutes at Disneyland, and that's about it. That's the most immersive experience you can get. And so for Americans who are coming here and experiencing a full feature film that way, I'm talking about the chairs that move, mist gets sprayed at you, there might be scents and whatnot. It's not my favorite way to watch a film. It builds a lot of anxiety. But for Westerners who don't have that as readily available, it's a really fun kind of technologist way to see this country. And like Colin was saying, this is one of the prongs that Korea is known for, is really adopting technology early and making it available in a way that in the West we still haven't done.
Right, now that you mention it, I think I take our theaters for granted. I actually should take one of my friends from abroad to the cinema soon. Colin, do you suppose the absence of language barriers will serve to perhaps further boost global interest in K-theater?
Well, in a way, it's tempting. I think it's tempting for the promoters of Korean culture abroad to believe that it will, as Kelly mentioned. It's a standard solution to these language problems, if problems they are, to have these subtitles on both sides of the stage. And I've seen that done here in Korea and with musicals and operas abroad as well. And it's an imperfect solution, certainly. And maybe if your glasses don't impede the view of the stage and can somehow get the subtitles on there legibly, while you can still hear the original, you know, it could be a solution we could all get used to. But I do emphasize, while you hear the original songs, while you hear the original dialogue, there was a case. There was a successful case recently of the Korean stage show, Maybe Happy Ending, which was a Tony Award winner, big success, I believe, in English translation or in English version, an adaptation of this show. So I do wonder to what extent the audiences on Broadway thought of it as being Korean. Maybe thematically, yes, but linguistically, I tend to think if you lose the language, you're missing a vital part of the cultural product. It's the same with films, which are not usually dubbed anymore, thank goodness. And with novels as well, I do wonder if you're reading in translation, how much are you reading a Korean work and how much are you not? It's a question that continues to bother me, but it came up again with BTS's latest album, Arirang, which we've discussed here before, but this is an album primarily in English, I would say at least 80, probably more % English language, and you do wonder with that and with the massive staff of English-speaking, native English-speaking songwriters and producers, how much is this KCulture anymore? Should it be stripped of the K? I wonder. But I think this is a trade-off, right? The global reach can also imply a certain dilution of what made the content, if you will, special in the first place. And that is a trade-off that can never be resolved finally. And so I think it's up to each work to go its own way in the world. However, it is sort of regrettable to see Korean cultural products succeeding primarily in English. I hope that doesn't happen.
Right. Kelly, meanwhile, an annual AI Film Award ceremony, it's slated to take place in the city of Cannes next month. What has been the media coverage of this particular event?
By no surprise, it's been quite a controversial event coming up, right? I believe earlier this month, there was also a film festival for AI-generated films in France, and that kind of got the same treatment in the media. At the core of this, there's a lot of debate. On one hand, some people seem to think that, you know, having award ceremonies or film festivals for AI films is, you know, a way to observe the leaps and bounds in the technology year to year. I read some reporting that, you know, at least at this film festival, the kind of films that were published this year versus last year was the inaugural year of the Cannes AI Film Festival. There was a big difference in what this technology was able to do. Some people make the argument that by separating these things into their own award ceremony or their own festival, that they are preserving the inherently human art form of just regular filmmaking. And then there are people that argue that, you know, AI art is not necessarily any less human or any less art than someone who were to shoot everything by hand, and that someone's prompting it, someone's giving it creative direction. It's still a question of taste, and there are certainly people that argue that this technology makes these things more accessible. Someone used to have to pay, you know, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to go study animation in university for their specialty for their entire career, to be only animating fire in Pixar films, right? That's not a very emotionally fulfilling thing. I guarantee you most of those students went in and they wanted to be the storytellers, right? And I remember I considered studying animation when I was young, and that's what deterred me. I was like, I'm not gonna pay all this money and study this art form just to be the person that, you know, specializes in flames or water. But, you know, this might potentially open up more people to have a better kind of creative control of their aspirations within animation and film. You know, it's a good question. It's a question of whether or not this also opens storytelling doors in terms of certain, you know, demographics of people who wouldn't have access to these industries as generally as, like, you know, older white men might be able to tell stories and win awards and accolades for it. There's also the argument that it cheapens art, and that art is inherently a human, entirely human-made endeavor. I don't really know. I mean, you see similar criticisms when CGI came out, actually. I just finished a book about the 90s into the turn of the 21st century, and there was a good section about this, how CGI was seen as a way of cheapening, you know, the arts. And I think, you know, obviously we used to hand draw animations, and that transition also upset some people. Whether you see AI as a first draft in the arts or a way to completely make art and, you know, elevate new people to the platform, I think this debate is going to continue. on and on. A couple years ago for the Washington Post, I did a story about, I think, the first guy that had ever done an illustrated children's book using entirely AI. And he walked me through the process of, you know, he had to come up with the idea, the concept, the plot, and basically prompt these images to be generated and prompt these verses to be righted. And then there was a lot of refining in between. And he made the argument that this is still very much an artistic endeavor and that he would never have had the funds or the, you know, the drawing ability to publish by himself a children's book otherwise. So, you know, I don't have any specific opinion on it, but this festival that's coming up in the awards, it'll be interesting. It kind of reminds me of changes in rock music, right? When like new metal bands came onto the scene, older rock bands scoffed at all the awards and accolades that they were getting, saying this is not real rock music, right? You're using electronic sounds and soundboards and auto-tune. Maybe this is some version of that.
Right, I suppose we'll get a clearer picture in the near future then. Colin, today we touched on quite a number of stories related to AI. Which one resonates with you, briefly speaking?
Well, I mean, as a cinephile, or I have been a cinephile, I think all of us would be a little bit dismayed at first to hear the news of a AI film festival in Cannes, but I do remind myself this is not a mature technology, what we refer to as AI these days. I mean, it's early days and they're being used primarily to imitate forms we already know, whether it's, you know, AI-written novels, AI-made films, AI-made cartoons, what have you. We know these things, people have made these before, and this is a way to demonstrate that this technology, what this technology can do, but the real potential is, can AI write a novel that no human could write? You know, where's the movie that we've never seen the likes of, that would be impossible for anyone to make with any amount of money? Where is the new form? I think we're waiting on that because, yes, replication of what we know is impressive in its way, but it's not, it doesn't tell us that we've reached the kind of cultural shift that comes with a genuinely new technology. Not yet, but maybe.
Right. Well, with regard to AI, I feel like we always have more questions than answers.
So far, yeah.
Colin, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you too.
Right, that ends this week's editions of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching and have a great weekend.